Okay, so this is from Deborah Stallman, and she asked, why are there so many differences in the counts people have in their NDEs? Many are widely different.
Yeah, so it's the consciousness of the human being and what they expect. So again, the consciousness creates reality. So I've even had testimonies where first you go into the dark void, and then at some point, if the experience is extensive, your attention is drawn to somewhere off to the side or maybe behind you, and you see the pinpoint of light. You go towards the light, and it's enveloped. Well, some people never make it past the dark void, and that dark void is basically, the way I understand it, and this is getting into science stuff that I don't get, but the way it's been explained to me by near-death experiencers, they set up quantum fields that are sort of like empty constructs where you can construct anything you want with consciousness. So when people are in these dark voids, they start going to fear mode. They just died. They don't know where they are. There's this empty darkness, and it can get real bad. And at many of them at some point say, okay, well, I'm dead. I'm here. There's nothing I can do about it. And as soon as they calm down, the experience becomes positive. So there's probably a combination of the ideas, thoughts, consciousness, experiences of the individual creating the environment, and those who may be part of that coming to meet you to give you the experience that you most need. So my guess, and again, that information is kind of spotty. When I hear something from 500 testimonies about the love and how it feels up there, that I know for sure. This, I'm speculating, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. It's a mixture of the will of the individual and those in heaven who are creating an environment for us that we like.
Another question from one of our subscribers, MS, and it says, please ask him to comment on the soul trap theory and entities that take form of relatives, Jesus, angels, etc. Why do these things use manipulation and tricks to send people back to Earth, like putting images and videos to our minds during NDEs? How about privacy rights during life reviews? Who gave those entities the authority to force us to do a life review? And who gave them the right to wipe out our memory before each life? If there are life contracts, then where is the evidence that we agreed? Some good questions.
Very good
how
question.
come we aren't allowed to lead our life and death according to our plan, and then are told what to do in near-death experiences by?
All right, so maybe we could tackle those one at a time, because that's a bit too much for me. Can you read the first one again?
Please ask him to comment on the soul trap theory and entities that take form of relatives, Jesus, angels, etc.
Okay, soul trap and entities that take forms of relatives. I have not heard about this in my near-death experience research, so I wish I could answer that question, but I have no information on that at all.
The next one,
why does there seem to be this manipulation going on of, showing people what they're going to help back on Earth if they go back? Why are they manipulated into going back? Why are they having their memories erased? Why is there planning going on? How come there's no privacy in this life review? Okay, every soul has the freedom. You don't have to come down here. There is a trans channel, I think I mentioned him earlier, Cryon, who's channeled by Lee Carroll, who talks about his conversation that he has with us before we come. We are part of those soul plans. So we get together with our soul group, maybe some guides, we pick out a life, we apply to come here. So we want to come down here. As crazy as that sounds, when you survey your life down here and it's so difficult and challenging at times, and dealing with certain people who are acting out and being cruel and selfish and violent, I think to myself, what was I thinking coming back here? Okay, so this conversation that Cryon says that he has with us says, well, okay, you just came back from Earth and you had a really difficult life, and you want to go back? And the soul says, oh yeah, well, I'm going back. But you're going to be separated from the love. You won't feel the love anymore. You won't feel the connection. You'll think you're mortal, and you'll have a fear of death, and you'll suffer, and you'll be in these frail bodies that can be harmed, and you'll go through pain and experience fear. You want to do that? You don't have to go down there. Why would you do that? He says, oh no, I'm going back. Well, where? Oh, same place I was before. I'm going to keep going back. I'm going to keep going back to Earth because we want to see the job finished. We're going to see it through to make sure that this planet ascends. So the souls that are coming back, they're not being manipulated. There's no manipulation in the life review. We have this idea of privacy. And at least from my personal view, when I'm keeping something private, it's because I don't want other people to know about it. And I don't want other people to know about my behavior because I'm afraid of judgment or what they'll think of me or being rejected for the way I behave or what I said or did or whatever. That doesn't exist in heaven. There's complete unconditional love. There is no desire generally on a soul's part to hide any of that information. So from our human perspective, we may see things a certain way, but our soul sees it differently. The soul wants to go through the life review, as difficult as it can be, because it's an incredible learning experience to learn how our words and actions affected the people around us. And even the planning, the soul can always choose. The guides are there to help choose a family and a person to incarnate into. We do choose our parents. I've heard that many times from near-death experiencers, but none of this is forced on us. And in terms of manipulation, the soul always has the right to say no. So many near-death experiencers are told, some are told it's not your time, you have to go back. That, they're not given a choice, but they're told that because as a soul before they came, they said, don't let me come back before I'm done. So they're probably following our instructions, is my guess. The memory wipe, that's part of the experience. Okay. If you think about it, what if you got two leaders of two countries and they're about ready to go to war, but they both have some high technology. They have virtual reality machines and they can hop in these machines and set up a scenario. And they think, well, I want to know as a leader where I'm sending my men to die and what they're going to experience. So I'm going to set up a virtual reality where I'm a foot soldier. Okay. So that virtual reality, the leader goes into it and he's there fighting and the bullets are whizzing by and his buddies are getting killed. Is it real? Is he afraid? Is he going to experience what a soldier experiences? No, because there's a missing element. He knows he's safe. He's not going to grieve when his buddy dies. It's just a computer simulation. But what if he thinks it's real? What if he forgets and he's in a simulation? That's the ultimate, kind of experience. And so we come here knowing we're going to forget. It's part of the game. We forget our common connection. We forget what heaven's like. We forget our origin and we see how we behave. We see how we perform. It's almost like a test of integrity and our love, so that's kind of how I see it. There's no lack of freedom. These are things we wanted. Our higher selves, okay, now this gets into crazy stuff, but this is what I've heard. We're not all here. Our higher selves are very large, powerful spheres of energy. And if you were to take all of that energy and try and incarnate it into a single human body, it would burn up. So just like God separates a tiny little portion of himself to create a unique perspective, and that becomes the individual, our souls do the same thing. We separate a little part of our energy and we send it to incarnate on Earth. So most of us is still on the other side of the veil, and they're the ones calling the shots.
Yeah, but
it's us.
Right. And maybe 10 or 15% of our consciousness is actually down here incarnating, right?
Right. It's similar to what I did when I was young and stupid. I'd go out drinking with my friends and I would say, don't let me drive home drunk. Yeah. Wrestle the car keys out of my hand. Of course, I get real mad when they try to do it, but that was my instruction to them. Yeah. So kind of the same thing, but with good intentions on their part.
So next we have Mortal Clown. He goes, okay, so Yeah,
I
mortal
love
clown.
that
Yeah.
name. It's a
He
good,
goes.
good name of
He has two
threat.
questions. The first one is, and I really like this. Has he noticed a difference in levels of acceptance among family, friends, of experiences over the last 14 years?
Most are not, some are. It's very interesting. Most people who have a near-death experience, if they're married, that marriage doesn't survive. Because they come back as completely different people. One guy I heard about gave away a lot of his money afterwards. He's very wealthy, and his wife, who liked the good life, didn't like that at all. If the marriage does survive, it continues in a completely different way because the person's different. And it takes times for the family to adjust, but often they do. And sometimes they'll warm up to the idea that these things are real because they see the massive change in this person they knew so well that is now so different. And that's probably the biggest testimony.
I have another question from Brett. He says, I understand that there are relatively fewer negative NDEs compared to the ones that are like affirming, etc. He goes, in your studies, do any of the people who have less than fuzzy NDE eventually find that their experience contained positive after effects?
Oh, absolutely. Again, I really do believe the NDE's experience will be what the individual soul needs. And I think it was Eckhart Tolle who said, life will give us whatever experience is necessary for the expansion of our consciousness. And I truly believe that. So, for instance, one negative NDE was a guy who he had a good wife and a good family, and a good job, and he was really screwing it up with his drug addiction and hanging out with friends and thinking he could kind of have a foot in both worlds. And he was kind of holding it together, but his drug use got worse and worse. And of course, it killed him one day. And he had a hellish experience. Well, that's probably what he needed to scare him out of it, you know? And that'll work. If you're trying to teach a child not to touch the hot stove, you can do it two ways. You can, every time the child reaches towards the stove, you can grab his hand and say, no, 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 that's hot. That's going to burn you. And you just keep doing that. And weeks or months, he'll eventually learn not to touch the stove. Or if you want to have a scary experience, you can teach him real fast. You let him touch the stove one time. He'll never touch it again. So a soul might choose to, a big event like that, in the pre-soul planning where you're going to have, that's probably pre-planning before they came here. You're going to have a negative ND. Probably plan that. Like that was the only thing that would snap him out of his lifestyle. And it worked. He came back and was a completely different person. So most of the hellish NDEs that I've heard made very positive impacts in the person's life. One of the very early NDEs I heard, it was from a great uncle of mine. And he had had a heart attack and he had a hellish NDE. And when he came back, he says, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't argue with people, I don't insult people, I don't yell at people. And he was kind of one of these guys that always yelled and, get in your face. And he says, I'm as gentle as can be because I'm never going back there. It's what he needed to bring him into the light.
So you think that certain individuals just require different treatments, I guess, or experiences in order to put them back on track?
Sure. And I think there's another element to it. When a soul dies, depending on the emotional state they're in, if they're in a very negative emotional state, it can cause a hellish NDE. But again, our entire existence as souls has a self-correcting mechanism to it. So whatever we need to grow and develop, we're going to get that, even if it's a difficult experience like a hellish NDE.
Yeah.
It will always self-correct, and it's not some permanent place of eternal punishment that, it's almost kind of ridiculous what I was taught by religion, well, God, he loves you. And, his love is so grand because we're his children. But, if you disobey him, he will send you to hell to burn forever. But he loves you. That doesn't make sense. So, yeah, well, that's not a a God attribute, this punishment if you don't do what I tell you. That is a human concept. So, and we tend to take our human attributes and apply them to God. I mean, there's some religions where they say, well, there's a battle in heaven between the angels and a third of the angels fell. No, war is a human concept. There's no battle on the other side of the veil. There's nothing but unity. And we take our ideas and we project it and say, well, that's what it must be like. They must be like us. Well, now the mind of God is not the mind of human being. It cannot be fathomed. It is pure light, love, and compassion. It doesn't have judgment. It doesn't have punishment. It doesn't have anger. It doesn't even have expectation, not the way we use that word. It has hopes for us. Some people, when they're in the presence of God or Jesus or angels and they're having the life review, they can sense the emotions of the people watching with them. And they have really high hopes for us. They always hope that we'll choose the path of light and love. And when we don't, it's kind of a bummer for them, but they know that, being human is difficult and we're going to make a lot of mistakes when we come down here. They know that, before your child is born, your child's going to make a lot of mistakes in life, but that doesn't mean you love them any less. Exactly. That's expected.
In your research, have you ever come across, like, I've had a lot of these conversations lately for some reason, so it's got to mean something that you and I are talking right now, and I'm asking you this question. Yeah, exactly. Have you ever come across anyone who's experienced like a multi-universe kind of vision? For example, they may have seen themselves and their partner living in the same time, but like in different but similar situations.
Oh yeah. I've heard that lots of times. One woman who had an NDE, she was having a lot of problems with her teenage daughter, and they told her, well, last time you were her daughter, and the deal was you both wanted to experience what it was like to be a mother with the teenage daughter giving you a really hard time and how you would react and the learning that came from that. So last time around you were her daughter and you gave her a hard time. So this is just her turn now, and you got to do your best to deal with it as she did her best to deal with it. And of course, these are apparently, and this kind of trips me out a little bit, but this is what I hear, over and over again. So there's soul groups, just like there's groups of people here on earth that like to hang out with each other and do things, there's soul groups with common interest, and they incarnate in various scenarios, brother and sister, mother and father, and, husband and wife, best friends, enemies. And they go into all different scenarios with each other because they've been together for a very long time, and they learn from these different scenarios, and they take turns. Well, I'm going to be the good guy this time, and you're going to be the bad guy. So it's almost like kids playing cops and robbers, and we'll both learn from the experience, no matter what our roles are. So, oh yeah, that's very common.
But what about simultaneously? Like, let's say somebody had near-death experience and said, well, you know what, I discovered while I was somewhere that I have, various other versions of me and relationships in this current life that are happening simultaneously in another universe.
Yeah. So we, from our physical perspective, because we're in the illusion of time, we see all our lives yet to come as our future lives, and our past lives as ones that have already happened. But our souls have a timeless, multi-dimensional nature. So really, all your lives that you've ever incarnated into, and we're talking probably thousands. I've heard the average human, if you could put it in the temporal terms with all their incarnations, is over 1 million years old. A couple hundred lifetimes on Earth. We've incarnated in other places. Yeah, so it's a it's a complex process. And there have been people that were shown that they lived on other planets. There have been people that were shown the super universe. So one guy, he said he was shown our universe in relation to the size of the super universe. So there are other dimensions, countless other dimensions with other universes, all full of life. And he said our entire universe was a tiny little pinpoint in the super universe. So, creation's unimaginably big. And often when a person has a talent, Peggy Fleming, famous ice skater decades ago, and I think an Olympic gold medalist. And I think when she was about 10 years old, she went ice skating on an outdoor pond with her neighbors. And the neighbors came back and they said to her mom, wow, so how long has been Peggy, taking lessons? Because she's doing spinning and all this stuff. And they said, oh, she's never ice skated before. Well, yes, she has. Okay. That's a talent from another lifetime. And that goes with dislikes too. I mean, one guy, he hated the cold. He really didn't like cold weather, cold climates. This guy just didn't like cold. Well, he was found out on the other side of the veil. He had a lifetime where he was a courier, and he would trek. It was in this Nordic type environment where there was just snow his entire life. He was cold for entire lifetimes. He doesn't like that. So a lot of our likes, dislikes, talents, and that kind of thing comes from other lifetimes. Yeah, from our multidimensional nature, from our soul's perspective, we're experiencing all the lifetimes simultaneously, and each lifetime affects all the others. And some people who are working through some really hard stuff here, like anxiety and things like that, that could be from one of the other lifetimes, and the person in that other life can't work it out. So it gets shifted to the person that can.
I wonder, do you have, before we go, any sort of message that you want to give the viewers, the people watching?
Sure. I get on these podcasts and I talk about this message of love and this beautiful future Earth. And a lot of people rightly, shake their heads like, no, I mean, because honestly, when you look at the world today and survey our world, it seems like everything's falling apart and it's only going to get worse, right? I mean, the chaos, the division, all the crazy stuff that's happening, it seems to be really going past a point of no return, like this is never going to get any better. Well, it is. The dance of consciousness is one of two steps forward and one step back, and we're in a one step back phase right now. It's just part of the dance. And so my advice is the same advice I give to myself, that if I followed it 100%, I'd have a much better life. I'm still trying the best I can, but I try and be really loving, compassionate, and cut myself a lot of slack to myself. I try and have that same attitude towards others. And then a big thing is turning off the news, not watching what's going on in the rest of the world. Now there's people who say, oh, what do you mean? I can't just be ignorant. Well, the human consciousness was not meant to take on the chaos and the suffering and the pain and all the stuff that's going on in an entire planet. It wasn't meant to do that. The news is nothing more than a well-crafted fear report. If you go to any news source and count the number of negative stories, it's going to be over 80%. So it's usually going to be negative, and it's usually going to be misinformation. And if there's nothing negative to report, they're going to report on something and spin it to make it negative. And it's just poison for the soul. The more we just pay attention to our own world, the people around us and the people we come in contact with, and focus on that, I think the happier we are. We're just not meant to take on the suffering of an entire planet. I mean, where does it end? We live in a galaxy full of life. Someday we're going to have communication with the rest of the galaxy. We're going to take on the suffering of a whole galaxy. Yeah, we need to put a stop to that, because it just causes anxiety in the individual. When I stopped watching the news, my level of peace jumped by about a factor of 10. It really did. And I'll hear about things, but secondhand, but I have a much better life. I don't have the anxiety I used to.
Thank you so much. I have one last question for you. If you had the opportunity to title this episode for YouTube, what would your title be?
Oh boy, that's a tough one. But I've heard the message from near-death experiencers when they saw the plan of creation, and they said they marveled at the utter simplicity of it all. They said it was a perfect, simple plan, and it's working itself out in its perfection. Well, doesn't seem like it from my perspective, but that's what's going on. So
it always amazes me also, the whole simplicity of it, because I mean, I've received messages like that tons of times in meditations about the simplicity and how overcomplicated we as humans make things. And And it's always the same thing. And you hear it with the NDEs, you hear it with all kinds of people that have STs. It's all about the same thing. We discussed this yesterday. It's love. It's really, if everybody would just embrace that and push that, what problems would we have? Different set of problems, but nothing like this.
That's a good title. ND researchers says it's all about love.
I love that. Okay, there it is, man. I really enjoyed this. Thanks for coming out and like filling in the blanks for me. Next day, it's the first time for me, but I thought it'd be nice to get some of these subscribers that have been so loyal, get their questions out there.
Yeah, they ask good questions. I like that. Yesterday was really uplifting. I have no outlet for this stuff. I have to keep my mouth shut 99% of the time. And there's just a handful of people in the world that I don't have to filter with. So it's wonderful having a conversation with you and your listeners where I don't have to filter, they get it, right? So
same here. I totally get what you mean by that.
All right, John. Hey, call anytime. I'm going to save your number and I may hit you up for some advice.
Anytime, man. It'd be great. Wonderful. Thanks a lot.
Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
You too, man. Take care.